The first-class cabin was quiet until one voice cut through the calm like a blade. "I don't want your kind sitting here." Every head turned. The man who spoke, a sharply dressed executive in his 40s, glared at the passenger who had just taken the seat beside him. His name was Richard Hale, a powerful investor known for arrogance as much as for money. The target of his words was Dr. James Carter, a calm, soft-spoken man in his mid-30s wearing comfortable travel clothes and a worn leather watch. He gave no reaction, only a quiet nod as though he had heard this sort of thing too many times before. Richard shifted in his seat, disgust flashing across his face. "Excuse me," he called out to the flight attendant, voice raised just enough for others to hear. "I paid for comfort, not to sit next to someone who probably got upgraded with points." The flight attendant froze, her face flushing. I'm so sorry, sir," she said awkwardly, glancing at Dr. Carter, who simply smiled and replied, "It's fine," but it wasn't fine. Every passenger could feel the tension. What no one knew was that this quiet man Richard had just humiliated would soon hold his future in his hands. As the plane taxied down the runway, Richard leaned back, phone in hand, barking into it with the confidence of someone used to control. "Tell the team I'll oversee the neural path acquisition myself. $100 million is nothing for what we're getting." He sipped his scotch. "It's a small AI company. We'll strip the assets and rebuild under our name. The rest? Disposable." In the corner of the same airport lounge before boarding, Dr. Carter had been reading research papers on his tablet, deep studies on neural mapping and ethical AI. He was traveling home after visiting family, content, and unnoticed. But fate had arranged otherwise. When the boarding announcement echoed, Richard strode toward the gate as if he owned the airline. "First class Hale, Richard Hale," he announced, flashing his ticket like a badge of power. Dr. Carter followed quietly, greeting the gate agent with a warm smile. "Good to see you again," the agent whispered with genuine respect. Once seated, Richard immediately began sending emails, filling his tray with papers and a glowing laptop screen. His energy was that of a man in constant battle, always winning, always stepping on someone to do it. When Dr. Carter arrived at the adjacent seat, Richard's jaw clenched. He leaned away dramatically, pulling his briefcase close. The flight attendant tried to help, but Dr. Carter simply said, "I'm fine." He stored his bag neatly and sat down, unbothered. Richard made sure everyone noticed his displeasure. He sighed, he fidgeted, he made a show of scrolling through his phone. Then his eyes caught something. A digital report open on Dr. Carter's tablet. It looked familiar. Too familiar. "Where did you get that file?" Richard demanded. "That's confidential. My firm prepared that report for the neural path acquisition." Dr. Carter turned off the screen. "You must be mistaken. Don't play games," Richard snapped. "That's proprietary information." Nearby, passengers turned to look. Dr. Carter kept his tone steady. "Please lower your voice, sir." Richard waved for the attendant. "Check his ticket." "He doesn't belong in first class." The attendant hesitated, embarrassed. "Sir, this is Dr. Carter. He's a frequent flyer with us." Richard's face twisted in confusion. "Doctor of what exactly?" "These diversity upgrade programs are getting ridiculous." Dr. Carter looked at him evenly. "I paid for my seat, same as you." "Then prove it," Richard sneered, hand out. Dr. Carter handed over his ticket. Richard found nothing wrong and muttered, "Well, everything's in order. First time flying up here? The champagne's free." "I don't drink," Dr. Carter replied. "Probably for the best," Richard said smugly, turning back to his phone. The plane lifted into the clouds. 30 minutes later, beverage service began. Richard spread his papers wide, invading Dr. Carter's space. When the drinks arrived, he reached for a folder and spilled his water across Dr. Carter's lap. "Oh, these seats are too cramped," Richard said flatly, not bothering to apologize. "They let anyone in here these days." Dr. Carter dabbed at his clothes with napkins, calm even as whispers filled the air. Richard's phone buzzed. "Hale speaking," he barked. "What do you mean the CEO won't sign?" "Tell him I don't meet with small fish. The deal's closing today, period." Dr. Carter listened quietly as Richard bragged about dismantling Neural Path, the very company he was trying to acquire. "You know," Dr. Carter said during a pause, "neural mapping has incredible potential for medical research." Richard laughed. You wouldn't understand. It's complicated tech. Algorithms, neural layers, and brain simulation stuff. Probably not your field. Actually, Dr. Carter replied gently, it's exactly my field. Richard didn't notice the weight of that truth. He simply waved his hand dismissively. Good for you. Stick to your hobby. But the balance of power was already shifting. When Richard stepped away to the restroom, Dr. Carter sent a quiet message on his phone. Change of plans. I'll evaluate Hale personally before any signatures. He put his phone away and waited calmly as the man who had insulted him returned, unaware that his empire was about to crumble. Richard Hale returned to his seat, muttering into his phone, still drowning in his own arrogance. I don't care what the NeuralPath CEO wants. Once I own the company, they'll follow orders or find the door. Dr. James Carter sat quietly beside him, eyes calm but thoughtful. To anyone else, he appeared just another traveler passing time with research notes. But behind that calm exterior, decisions were already forming that would change the course of both their lives. As the hum of the engines filled the silence, Richard continued to talk loudly about streamlining and eliminating inefficiencies. His words carried across the cabin, a performance for an audience that didn't exist. The attendant returned to check on them. Is everything all right, gentlemen? She asked gently. Yes, fine, Dr. Carter said with an easy smile. Thank you, she nodded, relief flashing in her eyes. The captain wanted me to thank you again for your recent scholarship donation. Dr. Carter, the aviation students you sponsored are already excelling. Richard's expression snapped from arrogance to confusion. Scholarship donation? The attendant smiled. Yes, the STEM Foundation program. You've changed a lot of lives. As she walked away, Richard stared at Dr. Carter with new suspicion. You're some kind of philanthropist? Just someone who believes in opportunity, Dr. Carter replied. Richard snorted. That's cute. I believe in results. Minutes passed, heavy with unspoken tension. Then another text came through on Richard's phone. His face paled. And CEO refuses to sign until meeting new investor in person. That's absurd, he whispered. He doesn't need to meet me. The paperwork's already done. Dr. Carter tilted his head slightly. Sometimes character matters as much as numbers. Richard turned sharply toward him. You sound like one of those ethics professors who think feelings should guide business decisions. That's not how the world works. Maybe not your world, Dr. Carter replied softly. Richard ignored the jab, returning to his drink. You'll understand when you've built something worth billions. Profit defines success, not principles. The plane hit light turbulence, making the ice in his glass tremble. Richard reached for his files again, his nerves showing now. His arrogance was beginning to crack. Excuse me, Dr. Carter said politely. Rising to go to the restroom, Richard didn't reply, too consumed by frustration. Inside the restroom, Dr. Carter's calm demeanor shifted to quiet command. He took out his phone and dialed a secure number. This is Carter. Initiate Protocol 7 on Hale's acquisition. A woman's composed voice answered. Are you sure, sir? The board was expecting signatures today. Delay it, he said. I've met Richard Hale in person. His ethics are unacceptable. Understood, Dr. Carter, she replied. We'll inform the team. He ended the call and looked at his reflection in the mirror. Gone was the humble traveler. The face staring back was that of the CEO of NeuralPath Technologies, the very company Hale was bragging about dismantling. When he returned to his seat, Richard was pretending to work but glanced up nervously as Dr. Carter sat down. Something about the man's confidence now seemed different. The seat pocket looked slightly disturbed. Dr. Carter noticed but said nothing. He knew Richard had gone through his belongings. A few minutes later, Richard's phone buzzed again. His assistant's message appeared on the screen. CEO delaying indefinitely. Wants character assessment of investors. Richard's grip tightened. Unbelievable, he muttered. These people don't know who they're dealing with. He turned to the white passenger across the aisle, speaking loudly enough for Dr. Carter to hear. This is what happens when these diversity startups get too big for their britches. They forget their place. Dr. Carter remained silent, but inside his decision was sealed. His company, his vision, would never fall into hands like Richard Hale's. As the flight neared its midpoint, the hum of the engines softened. The light outside the windows was golden and calm. It was in that peace that something powerful began to shift. Power no longer belonged to the man shouting orders. It belonged to the one who never raised his voice. The aircraft began its slow descent through the clouds. Richard checked his watch every few seconds, tension coiling through his body like wire. When the wheels touched down, he was already unbuckling before the seatbelt sign blinked off. He grabbed his briefcase and muttered, "I've got to be at Neural Path headquarters within the hour. The CEO's expecting me." Dr. James Carter stayed seated, collecting his things with unhurried grace. He nodded at the attendants who greeted him warmly, their respect clear. Richard noticed confusion cutting through his arrogance. Why did they treat this quiet man like someone important? As passengers hurried out, Richard barked into his phone, "Get the car ready. I don't care about traffic, just move." Outside the terminal, frustration struck again. His driver called to say an accident had blocked the bridge. Delay. 40 minutes. Unacceptable. Then he saw something that stopped him cold. Across the terminal, a chauffeur stood near a private exit, holding a digital sign, "Dr. James Carter, CEO." Richard froze. His breath caught in his throat. "CEO?" He stared at the man walking calmly toward the waiting car, the same man he had insulted, dismissed, humiliated. "Wait." Richard's voice cracked as he broke into a run, briefcase swinging wildly. "Dr. Carter, James!" Carter turned, expression unreadable. "Yes? You're the CEO of Neural Path?" "The same one you've been sitting beside for 3 hours," James replied evenly. For a moment, the airport noise seemed to vanish. Richard's world shrank to the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Every cruel word, every sneer, every arrogant boast replayed in his mind like a confession he couldn't take back. "There's been a misunderstanding," Richard stammered. "I wasn't myself on the flight. It's been stressful." James studied him quietly. "I think you were very much yourself." "That's the problem." "Please," Richard begged. "That deal means everything to my firm. I can explain." James didn't raise his voice, yet the calm in it commanded more power than any outburst could. "We have a meeting scheduled, Mr. Hale. My team is waiting. You're welcome to join us." Relief flickered across Richard's face. "Of course, yes, I'd appreciate that." James gestured toward his car. "Come along then. We can discuss whether this partnership is still possible." Inside the sleek black sedan, silence filled the air like judgment. Richard shifted uneasily, his earlier confidence gone. He tried to rebuild it, to reach for the version of himself that had always talked his way out of disaster. "About what I said earlier," he began. "The restructuring, I only meant improving efficiency." James turned his gaze toward him. "By firing my entire research team?" Richard swallowed. No. That was a miscommunication. I just meant operational optimization. "And the part about diversity hires and government incentives?" James asked calmly. Richard's mouth went dry. "That was taken out of context." "In private conversations," James said quietly, "a person's true character is revealed." They drove past the shimmering skyline, glass towers catching the sunlight. Richard looked out, seeing the Neural Path building rise in the distance, an elegant structure of curved glass shaped like the human brain. It gleamed with innovation and integrity, everything his world of ruthless profit lacked. "I can fix this," Richard whispered. "We can renegotiate. Better terms, more funding. Whatever it takes." James shook his head. This was never about money. Neural Path was built to create technology that helps people, not to exploit them. "I need partners who understand that." As the car slowed in front of the headquarters, Richard saw a group of executives waiting outside. Each held a portfolio stamped with competing offers from other investors. His chest tightened. He realized too late that he wasn't walking into a business meeting. He was walking into judgment. James stepped out first, shoulders straight, calm as ever. Richard followed, his confidence in shreds. The man who once commanded rooms now struggling to keep pace. The doors of Neural Path slid open, welcoming one man home and showing another what real power looked like. And as they stepped inside, every eye turned to watch. The reckoning was about to begin. The sound of their footsteps echoed through the glass halls of Neural Path's headquarters. Every corner radiated purpose. Scientists in quiet discussion, engineers reviewing holographic projections, ideas alive in motion. Richard Hale had walked into many companies before, but none had ever made him feel small until now. At the end of the main corridor stood a large glass door that opened automatically as they approached. Inside waited the full executive board. 12 people turned toward the entrance as Dr. James Carter stepped in, calm and composed. His leadership filled the room like quiet thunder. "Good afternoon," he said. "This is Richard Hale from Hale Investments." The woman at the center of the table, tall, confident, her eyes sharp, gave a polite nod. "We're familiar with Mr. Hale." Her tone held the kind of professionalism that cut deeper than disdain. Richard tried to smile, but it felt like an act that no longer worked. "Pleasure to meet all of you," he said, taking the seat directly across from James. James remained standing. "Before we talk about partnerships, I believe transparency is important. During our flight, Mr. Hale wasn't aware of my position. That gave me a chance to understand who he really is, beyond titles and rehearsed presentations." The room stilled. Richard shifted uncomfortably. James continued, voice steady and deliberate. "He spoke of dismantling this company, of firing our people, of viewing diversity as a weakness, not a strength. That's taken out of context," Richard blurted out. His hands tightened around the edge of the table. "You can't, those were private comments." James tapped the side of his smartwatch and a voice filled the room. Richard's own, recorded clearly, unmistakably. "These diversity hire companies need proper guidance to reach their real market value. Ethics are luxuries for people who can afford them. Once this deal closes, we're gutting their management and replacing them with professionals." Every person at the table turned toward Richard. No one spoke. The recording continued for several seconds, each word landing heavier than the last. Richard's face drained of color. "You recorded me?" "That's illegal." A woman sitting to James's right adjusted her glasses. "We operate in a single-party consent state, Mr. Hale. Perfectly legal." He stared at the table, eyes darting for an escape that didn't exist. "This is entrapment." "No," James replied softly. "It's truth." Richard could feel every ounce of his empire slipping through his fingers. He looked at his own team, his junior associate, his legal advisor, both avoiding his gaze. James looked around the table. Neural Path was built on principles that go beyond profit. We develop technology that respects people. Our diversity isn't a marketing tool. It's the reason we succeed. One of Richard's own team members hesitated, then spoke quietly. "Dr. Carter, I had no idea Mr. Hale felt that way. I want to apologize. His views don't represent all of us." James gave him a small nod. "Accountability begins with honesty." He turned back to Richard. "We've received several competing offers," he said, gesturing for his assistant to distribute the folders now being passed around the table. "Each one matches your financial proposal but includes commitments to our ethical framework." Richard flipped through the documents, his pulse racing. The offers were real. Larger firms, reputable investors, all eager to take his place. "I can match these," he said quickly. "I'll raise my bid. 15% higher." "This isn't an auction," James replied. "We don't sell our values to the highest bidder." Richard's voice cracked. "Please, this deal, if I lose it, my firm collapses. Just tell me what it'll take to fix this." James conferred quietly with his board, then faced him again. "There's a path forward, but under strict conditions." He listed them with measured clarity. "First, you'll remain a minority investor only with no operational control. Second, your firm will undergo comprehensive inclusion training for all executives. Third, you'll establish a scholarship fund of $5 million to support underrepresented students in technology." Richard's assistant leaned in and whispered, "Take it. You don't have a choice." Richard swallowed his pride. His empire demanded survival, but his pride demanded denial. For once the empire won. "I accept," he said quietly. The meeting dragged for hours as legal teams finalized documents. Each signature from Richard felt heavier than the one before, each page sealing another loss of control. When it was over, James approached him privately. "Mr. Hale," he said, his tone calm but final, "I hope this teaches you something lasting. Power built on arrogance collapses fast. The world is changing and people remember how they're treated." Richard nodded faintly. "I understand." James looked him in the eye. "No, you're starting to." As Richard left the building, every gaze in the lobby followed him, not with admiration, but with recognition. His name had already traveled faster than he could walk. Outside, the afternoon sun burned bright against the glass towers. He loosened his tie and stepped into his car. The moment he shut the door, his phone rang. The caller ID read Lambert Capital Partners, his largest investor. He answered with trembling fingers. "Lambert, I can explain." The voice on the other end was cold and sharp. "Richard, we've received troubling reports about your behavior. We'll need a meeting immediately." The call ended before he could respond. He leaned back, staring at the neural path building in the distance. For the first time in years, Richard Hale felt powerless. The kind of powerless that money could never fix. The car pulled away slowly, and behind the glass walls, Dr. James Carter watched in silence. Not with anger, not even with triumph, just quiet certainty that justice at last had found its moment. Weeks passed and the world moved fast. But for Richard Hale, every day felt heavier than the one before. His name had become a whisper in the hallways of power, one that carried a warning instead of respect. A month after the disastrous meeting, Richard sat in the same boardroom where he had once ruled. The long mahogany table stretched before him, lined with the very directors who had once cheered his ambition. Now their expressions were cold, their eyes distant. "This internal review has gathered serious evidence of unethical conduct," the chairwoman said, "not only at Neural Path but across multiple acquisitions." On the screen, a slideshow began to play. Witness statements, flight attendants, passengers from that flight who had written to confirm what they saw. Then, the recording, his own voice, arrogant and undeniable. Discrimination disguised as business talk, cruelty wrapped in confidence. He tried to defend himself. "You're misunderstanding my strategy. These were negotiation tactics." One director leaned forward. "Discrimination is not a tactic, Richard. It's a failure." Another opened a thick folder. "We also uncovered previous complaints buried by HR under your direction. This isn't one mistake. It's a pattern." He felt the ground beneath him shift. For years he had moved through rooms like a storm, unstoppable, certain that results would erase everything else. But this time, results didn't save him. The board voted unanimously. "Effective immediately, you are removed from all leadership roles. Your shares will be bought out under the ethics violation clause." $30 million vanished with those words. Security escorted him from the office as employees watched in silence. Some pitied him. Most didn't. The man who had spoken over everyone now walked through the hallway, unable to meet a single gaze. Outside, the city pulsed with life. But for Richard Hale, the noise faded into nothing. He looked up at the building that once carried his name, its glass facade gleaming in the sunlight. He had built it. He had ruled it. And now, it rejected him. Across town, Neural Path was thriving. The new partnerships forged under James Carter's leadership brought not just funding, but purpose. Ethical AI solutions that improved healthcare, accessibility, and education spread rapidly across the country. Within months, the company's valuation tripled. James launched a new initiative, an investment fund supporting diverse founders in technology. His philosophy was simple. True innovation begins with inclusion. Reporters covered it everywhere. They called it the Carter Effect, a movement that changed how investors viewed ethics, transforming what once seemed idealistic into smart strategy. Richard's story became part of that conversation too, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. What had started on a plane became a symbol of accountability, spreading across the entire industry. 6 months later, James stood on the stage of the Global Technology Ethics Summit. Applause thundered through the hall as he accepted the Visionary Leadership Award. "This award," he said, "is not about me. It's about what we choose to value in progress. Technology without empathy can destroy as easily as it creates. But when guided by conscience, it becomes a force for humanity." The audience rose to their feet. Cameras flashed. In a small apartment miles away, Richard watched the speech on his laptop. His penthouse was gone, replaced by a modest space cluttered with papers and unpaid bills. The glow of the screen lit his face, worn now, older somehow. For the first time, he didn't feel anger, only reflection. He opened a new document on his computer titled Accountability Plan. Beneath the heading, he typed slowly, "Change begins when excuses end." 2 days later, James sat in a quiet coffee shop near his company's headquarters. Across from him sat a familiar face, the flight attendant from that day, smiling through tears as she showed him an acceptance letter to a coding academy funded by his scholarship program. "I never thought someone like me could belong in tech," she said softly. James smiled. "The best innovators understand people before they understand code. You'll do great." Later that afternoon, he walked through the airport again, unnoticed this time. He helped an elderly traveler lift her bag into the overhead compartment. "Thank you, young man," she said kindly. "You didn't have to do that." James smiled. "We all need a little help sometimes." He settled into his seat, and the man beside him, a nervous young entrepreneur, fumbled through notes for his first big pitch. James watched for a moment, recognizing that mix of hope and fear. "First meeting?" he asked gently. The young man nodded. "Yeah, I just want someone to believe in what I'm building." James smiled. "Tell me about it." As the plane lifted into the sky, a quiet irony filled the air. The same setting that once revealed arrogance now carried the promise of something new: humility, potential, and the quiet power of doing right when no one is watching. And as clouds parted over the horizon, it was clear that justice hadn't just humbled one man. It had changed an entire world.